Dr. Schut, I would like to ask you now more about the history of Martin. I understand he came first to Texas. He's one of the early settlers of Texas, along with Stephen Austin. What do you think is his merit to Texas? I mean, obviously he founded Victoria in 1824. Yes. What do you think at that time was his merit as being Mexican, coming to Texas and establishing a colony?
Well, Don Martin was basically, and for good reason, a proud Spaniard. Both he and his wife, de la Garces, had a great deal to do with founding the many towns in northern New Spain, Mexico. They came into Texas at a very critical time, early 1800s, 1803. They lived in several places on the Nueces River, the Aransas River, in San Antonio, at La Bahia, which we now call Goliad, and finally here, with the founding of this colony in 1824. It's detailed and complicated, but there was what we might call an open window of opportunity in the spring of 1824 when he applied as a proprietor or impresario, a contract between himself and the state of Coahuila, Texas. And that was the beginning of this county and city. That settlement, Guadalupe, Victoria, lasted only 12 years, 1824, 1836. And then, of course, sovereignty changed, and we're dealing with Texas Republic as the next important constitution and laws. But it was during that short 12-year period that challenges such as climate and water, hostility of local Indians, the threat of a tsunami from the east, that is the border with the United States, would soon engulf this area. That presented problems for Martin de Leon, and he was an extremely capable man in terms of putting together a group of supporters. The very highest civilian and military officers in the new Republic of Mexico supported him, supported his colony, and took his part in arguments that made the colony possible. That's what we're looking at, the dynamics of how the colony was established. And that, we'd like to think, has not been handled in the publications so far.
Okay. And Gary, I would like to ask you, personally, what do you find most amazing about this story of a Mexican impresario coming into Texas the early 1800s with his wife, which Patricia, which had a lot to do with his colony being successful. But his story, there are some people that considers the story of Martin de Leon as amazing, as the stuff of which movies are made of. What do you personally consider in his story the most amazing accomplishment, or the most important things that he accomplished that made him such a great, that makes it such a great history?
I think the thing that's most outstanding is that he couldn't have had a better checklist for making this colony a success than the facts which are revealed by history. He chose people to do things for him, accepting as a colonist John Lynn, who knew about trade with Mexico, who was bilingual, That was a big aid to making this colony a success. There were many applicants for colonies in Texas, but only 2 were successful. They fulfilled their contract, and that was Stephen Austin and Martin de Leon. And it didn't just happen. I think Martin de Leon he was well equipped to be impresario of this colony and to hold the reins of the colony and to have come into a place that was almost a wilderness and to make a go of it, to bring his family and to literally start from scratch. All there was the land and the river. Everything else they had to provide. And it's a story of extreme hardship, but you really get a definition of the word determination when you perceive what Martin de Leon accomplished here.
Do you think he was a leader in that time?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Although he was not technically an alcalde, he exercised those authorities here and was, he was ICOE, he was in charge of everything. And I'm just running out of words.
No, that's good, because I have the impression that in history, in particular, what I've learned about Martin de Leon is that we tend to have the image of this impresario that was just a huge character, but he was also a regular human being. I mean, I'm pretty sure he had, he must have faced a lot of challenges. As you said, it was a time of hardship, but also he was loved for someone, but others hated him, I suppose. What can you tell us, Dr. Shuk, about his encounters with? What do you think was the most important challenge he faced embracing all these different cultures? We were talking about the cultural differences and the challenges at that time. I think that pretty much defines what Texas is today. It's like we were talking about the melting pot, but at that time, I suppose it was more difficult to handle all these differences. How do you think? How do you envision? How do you see Martin de Leon in that time handling all those cultural differences?
Well, historians are obligated by training and a general agreement among colleagues that we should find answers to questions that have not yet been asked, so we don't continue to reinvent the wheel. In this case, there are 2 questions, and I think we've answered them adequately through the documents. Martin de Leon was a proud Spaniard, and he was sitting on the edge of the Anglo migration to Texas, which became, of course, in the long run, a bloody situation. We must not expect Martin de Leon to be a favorite uncle in his personality. We must not expect the documents to tell us that he was always a good neighbor, because he, like most of the military and civilian leaders of Mexico, the new Republic of Mexico, very suspicious of the dangers on the eastern border. It had faced Spain, and they were unable to settle Texas sufficiently to stop that flow. So we're going to find that his personality was mixed. family man, absolutely, and as Gary pointed out, very astute when it came to putting all the ducks in a line so that he was able to depend upon individuals such as the first 4 presidents of the Republic of Mexico, the most famous military officer at the time, military officer and scientist, Manuel Mier y Terán. And those were the individuals who helped him, as we might say, fight the battle of survival. He was threatened from the east, from the north, and from the south in terms of his boundaries and the encroachment of other colonies. And winning that battle of the boundaries was largely the product of a group of associates. And what kept them on common cause was their membership as brothers of Freemasonry, something that has not been fully understood. And we hope to make the way things worked, the dynamics of founding the colony and then seeing it through all of the challenges. And we're certainly happy to have you, Fernando Peña, and Victor Peña, to give us incredible insight to these 2 cultures that met on the Guadalupe River, because out of that encounter comes a good many lessons that are valuable to both cultures.